Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Outdoor Art Club presentation, Prison to Employment Connection. I'm Robin Geisler, and I'm working with Kate McCormick to bring you today's program. For those of you who are not familiar with the Outdoor Art Club, we're a nonprofit women's organization founded in 1902. The club engages in cultural, civic, and charitable work in our community. As one example of one of our past contributions to our community, in the year of its founding, the Outdoor Art Club was responsible for purchasing the playground equipment and planting the trees at Mill Valley's original elementary school, the Summit School, located in the center of town. In addition, the Outdoor Art Club has run a public speaker series for years so that people like you have the opportunity to learn about topics as varied as national politics, and San Quentin's innovative program to help inmates find jobs when they get out of, when they are released. Please note that the Zoom webinar has two different functions, one for chat and one for Q&A. We will not be using chat today, but we will use Q&A for you to send your questions to Diana and her guests anytime during the program. They welcome them and they will answer them at the end. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Meredith McCarty. Meredith is a member of the Outdoor Art Club, and she is the program chair for today's event. Welcome, Meredith. I think you're on. There you are. Yes. Welcome, Meredith. Thank you for bringing us Diana Williams so that she can tell us about her very successful program.
Thank you, Robin. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Prison to Employment Connection. In 2014, Diana Williams founded Prison to Employment, a nonprofit that helps incarcerated men at San Quentin transition to employment upon release. The program boasts a recidivism rate of 1% compared to a disturbing rate of 60% in the state of California. Diana and 3 formerly incarcerated men who graduated from the program will discuss the impact this groundbreaking course has had on the lives of men re-entering society. Diana began her work at San Quentin State Prison by volunteering with the California Reentry Program. There she connected with an inmate who wanted to create a program to help inmates get jobs upon reentry. Inspired by his vision, Diana created a 14-session curriculum and began reaching out to potential employers. Employer assessment data shows that 83% of the graduates interview better than people the employers are interviewing on the outside. Visit her website to learn more. Diana holds a BA in psychology and an MA in counseling psychology from Columbia University in New York. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Meredith, for that kind introduction, and thank all of you in the audience for being here with us today. I'm really glad to be here because I could talk about Prison to Employment Connection all day long, but I'll try and contain myself since we only have an hour. So let me begin by saying that I absolutely love the work that I do. And I love it because I get to be with people who, against many, many odds, are changing their lives. And we do offer a successful job readiness program. But just as important is that the program gives many of the men a sense of hope, a sense of value, and self-worth. And we want every man to know that he has something to offer once he's released. And it really is one of the honors of my life to work with these men, and they truly, truly inspire me. I'm going to start the presentation by showing 2 short clips from films that took place in San Quentin. After the clips, I'll give an overview of the program and then introduce the 3 men with us today who graduated. So please give me a moment here to get myself organized. Okay, here we go.
There are all walks of life in prison. There are men here who have been here 20 years and committed a crime when they were 14, and who came to prison as a teenager, never knew how to shave, didn't have a relationship with anyone, doesn't know how to separate his child self from his adult self. And those are the stories, and those are stories of transformation, the process it took for this person to change. Those stories are never told.
There's so many negative images out there. You know, I don't know what Orange is the New Black looks like, but I've seen plenty of prison movies, right? And even myself, when I was young, I had a certain image of who incarcerated people were and how they acted. And I think that's something that the public needs to know about, right? That's not true. There are people that want to change.
And the misconception is that we're no good to society, but we are good. And we can bring out a different perspective. We can show you a different light. You don't have to open up your whole heart, but let them work for it. We have to work for it again. We don't expect people to just give it to us. And if you don't see the change, then you have the right to reject me.
So that first film is called Voices of San Quentin, and it's available on YouTube. And we just had a few snippets here because the entire film is 20 minutes long. So I'm just going to fast forward here.
It's one thing that blew my mind.
So most of my time was spent in a maximum security level 4 prison. And in these level 4 prisons, there aren't any rehabilitative programs. The culture is very violent. There's a lot of violence, race riots, stabbings, assaults. And when those incidents happen, the prison goes on lockdown, which means I could spend from an hour to a year inside of a cell. So when we're on these lockdowns, there is no education. The education that will be given to you is basically what you give or what you want, how you want to educate yourself during these lockdowns. My first 10 years was spent 80, maybe 90% inside of a cell. So during that time, psychologically, I think the human brain is forced to tap into survival mode. I feel like that's relative to the individual. So how I related to survival was make sure my mind is sharp, I don't get defeated, go crazy, lose my mind. So I would read spiritual books, the Bible, the Quran, Buddhist books, or any self-help book that I would find. My favorite thing to read was about successful people. Anyone that had a success story, famous, I would love to read biographies or autobiographies about them. And I think I didn't realize at that time, but I think what it did for me was keep a sense of hope. And whatever hope looked like, I felt like I had something still to look forward to.
Okay, and this second film is...
Prison can be a very hostile place. You're not guaranteed.
This second film is called Cue Ball. It's available on Netflix. It runs about an hour and a half. And the film goes into detail about the basketball program at San Quentin and the positive impact it has on men who participate. The clip we're going to see here shows a man named Harry Smith being released from San Quentin.
Harry Smith.
Touching wall, 6 wall, 8 wall. I have one under escort from 18 to R&R.
get out, you're not that important no more. You just blend in with the rest of the 7 billion people in the world. In the Bible, it says that many are called, but few are chosen. So I feel it as I'm getting closer and closer to the house. I feel more of an anxiety, more of a weight. We just hope that you guys haven't given up on us. We're sorry for what we've done. And we're still here.
So yep, Harry's still here, and all the formerly incarcerated people are still here, and they hope for the same things in life that people who've never been incarcerated hope for: a good life, a home, family, and a job. So now I'd like to take you to our website and just introduce you to a few of the fundamental values and foundational principles. So we believe in restoring hope. We believe in connection. We believe in the power of a job. We believe people can change. We believe in second chances. And so I thought what I would do is just walk you through the curriculum briefly. So we start with an interest inventory because a lot of the men have had jobs or they have a skill set, but perhaps they've never really explored what they want to do. So it really helps them to see, oh my gosh, I am the kind of person who likes to work. I'm in a very organized environment with clear directions, and I like to work with numbers, and oh my gosh, I was applying for a job where I didn't get to do that. That's not going to work. So they get to see a little bit about who they are and what jobs would possibly work for them. We talk about identifying strengths, transferable skills, how to talk about their strengths with examples, and that takes a little bit of practice. We have a couple of pieces of homework. One is on work values. So what values are important to you in a job? So you're interviewing as well as interviewing the potential employer about what's important to you as well. We also have a homework assignment on where I ask the men to write an essay on their ideal job. So it's sort of intention setting, right? They get to talk about what they would envision for a perfect job, and it goes into great detail. Some of these men have written 2 pages, some have written 10 pages, and they're fascinating to read. They really are, and again, it really helps them to get a sense of what it is that they want to do and how they see themselves in this job. So of course, we talk about writing an effective resume, the components of that, and they fill out a detailed master job application. And then in the next class, we have resume writers come in from Salesforce and Cliff Bar, and they help the fellows write a first draft of their resume. The resume writers take them out of the prison, write another draft, bring it back in, and they end up with really beautiful, well-done resumes. Class 6 is an important topic. They learn how to discuss their criminal history in an interview. So the basic components of it are, I want to be honest and let you know I have a criminal history. I'm not the same person I was when I committed my crime. And here's what I've done while I was in prison. And we often ask the men to create what we call a rehabilitation packet. And that has in there certificates, any kind of programs they've taken, any education they've taken, degrees and things like that, so they can present it to the employer, and the employer can actually see, yeah, they did a lot of work when they were in prison. They were not just sitting around. These people have changed. Then we work on interview skills, common interview skills, and we actually, at the end of that, lob interview questions to them, so they have to answer them on the spot. And they do a really, really good job of that. We talk about launching a job search, how to prepare, where to look, how to manage possible rejection and disappointment. And we meet with each man individually to prepare them for Employer Day and perhaps go over any sticking points that they have. And then we put it all together in class 11, and then class 12 is Employer Day. And we have employers and service providers come in to the prison and interview the men. And each employer fills out an assessment form on each of the people that they interviewed. And I'll talk more about that later. And then graduation, everybody gets their certificate and we celebrate the completion. And often I have a guest speaker come in who was previously incarcerated so they can talk about their path to employment. I thought we could talk about some facts here. For those of you who don't know, there's approximately 2.2 million people incarcerated in the United States, and that is the highest prison population in the world. The prison population in the United States has increased 700% since 1970. We represent 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. 95% of inmates will eventually be released from prison. And so we have to ask the question, do we want people to be rehabilitated or punished and come out of prison worse than when they went in? Black men are incarcerated 6 times more often than white men. 1 out of every 4 Black males born today will end up in jail if current incarceration rates continue. Yeah, California spends, I think it's now $13 billion to oversee the prison population. And then recidivism rates in California hover around 60 to 65%. So 2 out of every 3 people who are released will return to prison in the next 3 years. Employment facts as they relate to formerly incarcerated. So a 2011 study showed that incarceration was the single most, employment is the single most important factor in decreasing recidivism, and that recidivism rates were nearly cut in half for former inmates who have full-time jobs. Let's see. Yeah, I think one of the most important figures here is that 85% to 89% of ex-offenders who are rearrested are unemployed. So again, speaking to very, very important piece of release is employment. And now some prison to employment connection facts. We do partner with over 50 Bay Area employers and service providers. As far as we know, we're one of the only program, if not the only program, in 35 prisons in California that connects inmates face-to-face with employers before they are released. And as Meredith mentioned, 85% of the inmates interview better than job candidates the employers are interviewing on the street. And 99% are interviewing as well or better. So the program works in this regard. We measure our success in that regard by figuring out how they are interviewing compared to people on the street. And we also do track recidivism, which our graduates have a 1% recidivism rate compared to the 65% in the state of California. I do have to add a caveat to that, which is that most of the men who join this, they're self-selected group, and perhaps they've done other programs in prison, but we like to take some credit for that. And then I'll just end this with a couple of testimonials, because I can talk about this all day and you're going to hear from the 3 men in a moment, but there's some testimonials from employers and let's see. There was one. Yeah, the employees we've hired from Prison to Employment Connection are more prepared for the workforce than 90% of other applicants we meet. They understand the importance of punctuality, reliability, following directions, skills imperative to any industry. In addition, their strong work ethics have listed the performance of the team members. We look forward to continue hiring graduates from this program. They are indeed an asset to our company. And then a couple of testimonials from our graduates. There are many, many here on the website, should you choose to look at them. Mike says, the thing that I've learned is that there are people willing to take chances on me in spite of my past, which empowers, inspires, and informs the future. Yes, I have inherent value. And the Quentin says, what did I get from this program? I received a sense of confidence. Why? After spending the last 35 years in prison, I had been constantly bombarded with negative images of how I will be perceived by employers as an ex-felon. Today, after meeting employers, my faith has been restored. So give me a moment to just get out of this. I'll be right there. Okay. I think I'm back. So let's see here. So there's a lot more to say about this, but I hope that this gave you a good sense of what we do. And now I'd like to introduce the three men who have joined us today. So Daniel Martinez, please turn on your video. Thank you. And Zach Moore, please turn on your video. There you are. And John Wyndham, please turn on your video. And there you are. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here. Daniel graduated from Prison to Employment in the fall of 2018, Zach in spring of 18, and Don in the spring of 2016. So before we take questions from the audience, I'd like to ask all of you just a couple of questions that may help set the stage for questions from the audience. So my first question is this. Please tell us what led to your incarceration, what you were convicted of, how much time you served, and when you were released. So let's start with Zach, then John, and then Daniel.
Thanks, Diana. As she introduced, my name's Zach. I was incarcerated for 22 years for first-degree murder, all over the state of California in several different prisons. The life leading up to my crime, I come from a middle-class background, family transplanted from the East Coast, from North Carolina, out here to California. And everything on the surface was pretty normal as for like a Protestant East Coast family, really stoic environment, really didn't share feelings or anything. And there was a lot of alcoholism behind the scenes. Both parents were alcoholics. And in addition to that, towards my middle school years, there started to end up being neglect in the household, lack of food, and other support from family members, and just, like just regular family support that a lot of individuals take for granted. I started getting involved with drugs, alcohol at the age of 13. And by the age of 14, I was a full-blown alcoholic, drinking almost 5 days a week, abusing drugs, and just doing anything I could to numb the pain that I was going through in my life. I didn't really have the coping skills at that time to understand, one, what was going on with my parents, my family. I thought it was normal, but also I was ashamed of it and ashamed of myself and everything that I was going through and struggling with. And then at the age of 15, I committed murder. It's a terrible decision. It was a horrible thing that I did. But I was fortunate enough that when I was incarcerated, I was actually able to get my life on track and live my life with meaning and purpose, and just honoring my victim in any way I can.
Zach, how long were you incarcerated?
22 years. I paroled a little over 2.5 years ago now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And John, same question?
Yes. Hello. My name is John Winham. I went to prison at 19 years of age for aiding and abetting. I got out at 49 years of age. I did 30 years. Been home 2 years. I was convicted of first-degree murder. Sentence was reduced to second degree. Then I did a lot of self-help programs while inside, because there's a lot of trauma I had to deal with growing up in a very crime-ridden area, low-income housing, mother raising 4 kids on her own, and me getting immersed into that gang culture and into the gang life, and getting immersed into that gang life and gang culture because I was hurting other people. So I had to correct that. And Diana's program had a lot to do with that. And I'll touch upon that later.
Thank you. And when were you released, John?
2 years ago. I've been home for 2 years now, and I've been taken off parole about 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Daniel, same question, please.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I was incarcerated for 16 months. I had a 32-month sentence, and I only had to do 16 months. I was convicted of possession of a controlled substance and paraphernalia. Like the other gentleman, I too got involved with drugs. I was raised in a religious household, but there was a lot of trauma. A lot of my dad wasn't there for a long time, and that was hard to deal with. Having a mother raise you without a father figure. He's there now. He's changed his life as well. But I didn't have the coping skills needed to deal with that. I didn't have someone to talk to as freely as I would have liked. So I got involved with drugs to kind of numb the pain, kind of get those things, put them in the background, so to speak. And had a real problem with drugs when I was arrested. Typically I'm 215, 220 pounds. When I was arrested, I weighed 170. So I had a huge problem and didn't know how to get that help. And I've been out since May 20th, 2019. So May this year will be 2 years.
Thank you, Daniel. So if you could please just tell us about your journey through the prison system, where you were first sent to prison, what that was like, and how San Quentin is different than other prisons in California. And Zach, if you want to go ahead and start.
Sure. So I went through the juvenile system at first, through the juvenile hall, but I was tried as an adult. So when I turned 17, 3 days after my 17th birthday, I was sent to adult facility. At that time, they were still sending people that were under the age of 18 to adult prisons for what they considered adult crimes at the time. And so I was sent to, because of my age, not necessarily because of the crime, I was sent to a maximum security level 4 prison with basically no support, no rehabilitation programs or anything like that. And basically I was in a position where I felt like I needed to do whatever I could to survive. All I had to go off of was, like anecdotal stuff from people in juvenile hall, other kids telling me what prison would be like, movies, TV shows. And so I already had an image of what prison was like. And when I got to the level 4s, it was almost like an exaggeration of what I had been taught it would be like. It was like I said, lack of rehabilitation programs, but also an overall gang mentality is the culture that was really instilled with individuals, especially the young individuals when they first came into the prison system away. And it was all under the guise of this is what you need to do to survive. Other than that, it's like I thought that my life was over and I wasn't going home anyway. So I engaged in criminal activity in prison. I sold drugs. I ended up committing violence inside, doing whatever like was necessary. I felt at the time. Now I know better. I was just feeding into the machine, but it was really, like I had maturing to do, and a level 4 prison was not the place really set up to help someone mature and to deal with their issues.
Yeah, thank you for that. And curious how your perception of how San Quentin is different than the other prisons in the state.
There's a joke inside that San Quentin's the Disneyland of prisons in California. And it's because it's not that there's a complete lack of violence there. It's like any prison, in any facility, there's always going to be a level of violence that occurs, but it's considered that because of the programming. They have when I was there was over 80 something self-help groups and programs available to individuals. Everything from the last mile, where I learned how to do my current job, to other, like your group, Diana, like to actually like help someone prepare for when they come home, not just deal with what they're currently incarcerated for and identifying, their causative factors and working through and growing, but also like support of, when they come home, what's the next steps?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. John, can you answer that?
For me, I made it to prison at 20 years of age. I went to New Folsom, level 4, gang yard.
Excuse me, John, could you just explain what a level 4 prison is for us?
A level, the maximum security, the highest level you can go.
Okay.
Where, you survive. You pray or you predator, period. That's the program. That's the difference between San Quentin and other prisons, is that we're programmed there to survive. In San Quentin, you're programmed there due to their programs to thrive, right? And to not only thrive inside, but Diana had innovative thinking and allowing us to thrive outside. There's two total different perspectives. Gang yard programs.
Thanks, John. And Daniel?
Yeah, the first time I went to prison, I was 19. And when I was 19, I went straight to a level 3. And then went to the SHU, which is a security housing unit, where you're sent if you participate in extreme violence or you're involved with gangs. So my first term, I went to the SHU, level 3s, and then worked my way down. And then on the drug term, I seen San Quentin. San Quentin was totally different than from what I was used to. There's actually programs. You have more freedom. You're able to walk around more freely. There's, you can walk unescorted, and you dorm living. I was in H unit, so we had dorm living. So many different programs. And what was different is that typically on a lockdown in other prisons, that was it. You were on lockdown. There was no movement. But with San Quentin, it was different. When there was lockdowns, depending on the degree of the lockdown, you would still be able to go to your programs when everyone else would be locked down. And you'd be able to go to your programs. And if you had a program, you'd come back and shower and be able to have a little bit more privileges than you would at other prisons. So there was a huge difference there.
Thank you. Could you tell the audience a little bit about a lockdown? What that is?
So there could be a gang fight, there could be riots, there could be a weapon found, they're searching for drugs, and other contraband. One of the correctional officers might have lost a bullet. They might have lost their keys. Maybe a tool is missing from the kitchen. Or maybe they just wanted to lock down because they didn't want to work.
So when you're locked down, you need to stay in your cells or in your housing unit, correct?
Yes. Sometimes you can, where the men are able to walk to the dining hall, or the food is brought to you. Sometimes it's a hot meal, but depending on what kind of lockdown, it might just be bag lunches for all 3 meals.
Mm. And how long do you have a sense of how long lockdowns typically last?
It all depends. I remember when at San Quentin the last time, a guard lost a like one of those tear gas canisters, apparently, and we were locked down probably for about a month, and came to find out that it was just misplaced. And but I've been on lockdowns where we're on lockdown for 5, 6, 7 months, no visits, no packages. You might be able to go to canteen, but probably very unlikely. That's why you're encouraged to stock up on all your hygiene and whatever essentials that you feel you need, because sometimes you won't be able to go to the store the whole duration of lockdown.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have one last question for you before we go to the audience, but is there anything else that you would like to share, given what has come up over the course of the conversation? Okay. All right, so my last question for you is, how did Prison to Employment Connection help you when you were released, and what work are you doing now? Zach.
Yeah, so earlier I'd mentioned the last mile, and it is it's a coding boot camp inside prisons, currently in a couple of prisons in California and some across the country. And when I got found suitable for parole, I really wanted to try my hand at that when I came home. And I understood that, Diana's program, Prison Employment Connection, was something that like I needed to do. I'd never had a job interview in my life. I'd never made a resume. I'd never made a cover letter. I hadn't even really thought about like what a job search would even look like. Even though I was getting the hard skills in the last mile, there was some other things I needed to learn due to the fact that I had never been on a job search. Like I said, I had been incarcerated since 15. So going through the program, learning how to write an effective resume was key. Even though like I was going for an engineering job, it was a technical resume I needed to write. And I remember, one of the volunteers, they didn't know how to write a technical resume, but they Googled it and brought the information in and helped me at least get a starter resume going that I polished once I came home and had access to other resources. But I would have had no idea where to look to even start that process. I feel that the most important thing though was there was two really important key things for me was the interview process, talking about my crime in an interview, deciding whether or not I even wanted to bring it up. In California, we have ban the box, and an employer is not supposed to bring up a background check until you're actually made a legitimate offer. But I also felt like, like I went to prison for a high profile case, so to speak. It was serious, and people have Google now. So like, what's to stop an employer for Googling, even if it is illegal, people do it. So I've already owned myself and owned my past, and, everything I've done, I take it like full responsibility for myself. So why not do it in the interview itself? And so the program really helped me like hone where in the interview I would talk about it. And I even added it to my cover letter and used my incarceration as, an empowering part of, me, like the grit and the grind to do what I did, and learn to code inside prison, right? Like who, like who else in the engineering has that type of like grit, right? That can say that they've done something similar. Right. And so like really highlighting that helped. The second thing was the job fair. right? At the employment fair where employers would actually come in. I'd never been on an interview, and it was a legitimate interview with all these companies. I knew that the potential for employment before I came home, and an offer letter from a company was always there with each of these. So it was real, it was tangible. And I also met like one of my first contacts at where I work now at that job fair. Even though he wasn't in the engineering department, I apparently nailed the interview. And he's like, if you were home right now, I'd hire you right now for my team, even though we don't do engineering. And so now, like after I came home, I was doing another panel about fair chance talent, and I was on there with a recruiter from that same company. And after talking with her, we connected, and I ended up with an internship at Checker, which is a background check company, ironically, as a software engineer. And after 16 weeks, converted to a full-time employer, and I've been there almost 2 years now as a full stack software engineer.
Thank you, Zach. That's great. Thank you. And John.
For me, I had taken several employability programs inside before taking Prison to Employment Connection, and there was many grave distinctions. For me, it was the interaction that we got from Diana and the other volunteers that made us feel like we were human, right? That we were normal. The system has a way of making us feel abnormal. So you won't hear me say, you won't hear me say inmate or convict. We say presently incarcerated loved ones or formerly incarcerated, just to stop labeling us and making us feel like we're less than, right? We control that. We're the people, right? Labels are important, and labels hurt. But moving forth, I got with Diana. I went through the program. You know, although, like I said, I took other programs, none of them set me before employers. That is a fear that you can only get over in having those mock interviews that she has. And we'll take all the time you can to help you get through that. Who does that? I mean, and then once we got through the interview, we got to sit down with actual employers. I was actually hired by 6 employers during my interview, but I was told I would never get a job, you know, and all those other things, right? But to sit with Diane and the volunteers, they take that myth away, obliterate, so to speak. So in fact that I had to become a facilitator. I want to help other men feel what I felt, to get that sense of confidence. It's empowering to know that you can, no matter what it is that you're doing, right? And it's been a hurdle for us as formerly incarcerated to gain employment. So a lot of us don't even try.
Thank you so much, John. And Daniel, same question for you.
The class that stood out to me in the curriculum was the second class, identifying strengths and transferable skills. I really enjoyed that lesson or that class because I didn't know how to, like, I had a job experience, but I didn't know how to articulate it, or I'd get nervous and not know how to, you know, because I thought, you know, I wouldn't be able to get the kind of job that I wanted, or the wage that I wanted. But the prison to employment connection really helped me to articulate that. For example, in talking about your strengths, you know, you would have to identify those strengths and then give an example. And then one of the other questions was, what are some of your weaknesses? And then you would have to give an example, but turn that weakness into a positive. For example, my thing was my weakness was pride. And so I was taught to, for example, I take pride in the job that I do, but so much pride where I don't want to ask for help. But I learned that when I ask for help, I'm able to get more done. And if I delegate, so on and so forth. So knowing how to share those strengths with those weaknesses and give examples. And if it's a weakness, how those examples, what you learned from those strengths and weaknesses. And how it helped me when I came home is I went to the program and then I was able to facilitate the following class and being able to give back to the other men behind the walls and being able to see them with their struggles and being able to help them, like add value to themselves because that value was shown to me. And then upon release, there was some parole classes I had to take. And sometimes the men in those classes, like myself, their confidence was low. They had no self-esteem, or they were labeled as a second-class citizen, when in actuality, we're not. We just made a mistake. We were caught for it. There's many people who've made the same mistakes that we have and just haven't been caught for it. But we're not second-class citizens. So we just say we have some challenges, we have some hurdles, but we're valuable. And being able to have Diana's class or program help us to see that we have value and then be able to give it back and help others. And then seeing the smiles on their faces, both inside and outside the walls. There's guys that I've been able to work with. And there's one guy that has really low self-confidence. And so he'd come in and, I would draw him out and ask him why he felt that way. Just like Diane would draw us out to find out, our skills and our talents, and then help and then highlight those positive things and help him, make him feel better about himself. So being able to incorporate that in your everyday life is empowering.
Thank you, Dan.
May I finish the question?
Sorry, that?
May I finish the question? What I'm doing now?
Well, you know what? I would like to hear what you're doing now, but I think we need to go to questions from the audience. Sorry to cut you off there. So I'm going to turn this over to Meredith. Yep, here she comes.
Thank you, Diana. And thank you, John and Zach and Daniel. I'm totally enjoying this whole experience. It's really moving. Here's some questions that we've got. Our first question is, there have been more public attention recently on criminal justice reform. What do you think the single most important change should be?
John, you want to take that?
Are you sure you want me to answer that right now?
Why?
Huh? Because I'm gonna be brutally honest, and I'm only here every day.
Please do. What's the most important change you would want to see?
Racism, prejudice, be changed, taken out of the system, and we treat people like people instead of like cattle or things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Let's see, is there another question?
There certainly is. Second question is, how did you keep hope alive while you were incarcerated?
Zach, you want to take that one?
Sure. Like the honest answer for that is, I had no hope for probably 10 years. I never thought I was going to come home. And so my efforts to change and, like who I was stemmed from my own remorse and, like my own belief that, like I still had some value and I was going to live the best life I could and be the best person I could while still incarcerated. And it wasn't until laws started changing in like around 2009, 2010 here in California that, like people started to see people that are incarcerated as people and not, like, as John said, not as inmates, not as offenders, not as prisoners, but actually understand this, like, wait a minute, like we're still community members. we're just separated from our families, we're separated from the community. And as laws started to take effect, that like SB 260, which, you know, like specifically affected me and my ability to, when I went to a parole hearing, they had to look at me in the context of the age I committed my crime as a 15-year-old, right? And who I was then, how I had grown over the years, and who I was now, and who I was going to be when I came home. And so that like these things started to light that hope in me again, to the point where it's like I had a conversation with my mom like decades ago where I told her, it's like, I'm never coming home. You need to be okay with that, you know? And then when this law passed, I had to call my mom again and said, hey, remember what I told you 10 years ago? That's not true anymore. I might come home now. And so like understanding that and like have that hope given back to me by someone else, by people that didn't even know me, right? By the voters of California and the people like senators, congressmen that actually understood like the plight of the justice system. That's what helped me get through that, especially the last 10 years. Even when I didn't think that I would ever come home, up till my parole hearing, I thought I was getting denied. My attorney came in during the parole hearing and told me, hey, why are you crying? Why is your head down? I was like, I'm sorry, I messed up the parole hearing. I don't know what's going on, right? Like, I just don't feel like they're hearing me. And he's like, no, dude, you're crushing it, right? Like regardless of how it comes out here, he goes, you definitely have owned yourself and your story and your narrative, right? Like, don't ever give up on yourself like that. And so like having people like that and just the system itself starting, like we're at the very tip of the iceberg at correcting things in this country. And there's so much more work that needs to be done. And every day that I see a victory, like that gives me more hope, not just for, you know, my own, you know, like future, but everyone that I left behind too.
Thank you, Zach.
Next question.
Yeah.
Okay. We saw from the video what a cell looks like. What was it like to have a cellmate in that tiny space? And did you get along well?
Let's see, Daniel, were you in a cell?
I was, yeah.
You want
yeah.
to talk about that a little bit? Because also, excuse me, I just want to say that the cell that you saw in the video was for 2 people.
Yeah, and so like Dan mentioned, the cells in San Quentin were originally constructed for one person, but with so many inmates in California, they added a bunk and a locker. At one point, since I moved into a cell that was someone already had lived there, the locker was on the top bunk, and between the bed and the locker, there was maybe, I don't know, maybe 16 inches from your body. And so imagine getting off the top bunk. You'd have to literally scoot and then roll onto your side, but you would have to make sure that your cellmate, his head, he wasn't sitting up, because if you kick your feet over the side of the bunk, you might kick him in the head. And then one person on the floor at a time. You couldn't both be walking inside the cell. If you were in the back of the cell and you needed to get to the front, your cellmate would either have to scoot all the way against the wall or sit or lay on his bed, so that way you can walk by. You would have to enter and exit one at a time. If you put your arms out, you spread your arms out towards your sides or up, and then you fold one arm and you hold it like this, you might be able to touch both walls. And so that's how small it is. It's probably the size of most bathrooms, if not a little bit bigger. So it's really challenging. On top of that, poor ventilation. You'd have, your food in your lockers and your TV. So imagine the small cell that you've seen, and then all your property as well. Your food, your hygiene, your personal clothes, photo albums, boxes of property, especially for the lifers. It's so unfortunate, so sad to see the lifers in there with their life literally in boxes. It's the cells in San Quentin are they're not livable. I mean, if you had people, some senators and congressmen, if you had more that had a heart walk through those cells, I mean, it's just inhumane. It really is. And what I learned at San Quentin is seeing those gentlemen in those cells like that, and with just blazing hope. They never let that keep them down. They always held their head up despite what kind of conditions, and they did their best. But if we could get more people in there to look and walk those cells, they would see how terrible it is. But yet, men like John and Zach and myself made the best out of it, and we kept our heads on straight so that we could be here with you guys today.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel.
We have a lot of questions. Well, here's one more here. What changes have to be made for employment to be easier for the formerly incarcerated?
John?
I think they're taking steps towards that. And me personally, I think what Diana is doing, in empowering you, letting your record be an empowerment instead of a weakness or something you shy away from. I found that it helps in the interviews. I think we need to empower the way Diana's doing, and it will change the perception of the employer of what we have done in our past and make it into a strength instead of a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will just say, hang on, Zach, I will just say that for the employers, most of whom who haven't been inside a prison before, I've had many say to me that it was one of the most moving experiences of their lives, because they got to see that these stereotypes are not true. And so I think connecting employers who are fearful or are hesitant and having them actually meet people inside prison is key to this. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head, like proximity, right? Like when you get proximate to the issue, then, you know, like you are able to relate to it and rehumanize us. The other thing is that, like, right, institutions like businesses, right? They've been doing business for hundreds of years a certain way, right? Like it wasn't until there used to be a law on television shows, the Hays Code, I believe it was called, where you couldn't even show someone like someone that is in prison or incarcerated or anything in a positive light. It was against the law to do that. And so, like, to have reform in that line and educate employers themselves, HR departments, CEOs, top-down leadership, and just it reinforces, right, like that sense of safety, right? Whenever you are able to put a face on the monster, so to speak, and really like strip away that mask that people's biases and fears, you know, like are associated with, you know, that's really what it is giving people an opportunity to have a real chance for employment, a level playing field. I teach people that I speak with many of the stuff I learned in Diana's class. Like I teach them about the interview process. Like, this is how I did it. This is how you can do it. But also that it's every one of us is an ambassador, and you have to keep doing it because that's the only way we're going to change hearts and minds.
Great. Yeah, Daniel, you want to add anything to that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if we could possibly, if everyone could stay for 10 minutes. We do have more questions. If you could, it would just be great. Maybe until 10 after, because it's just 2 o'clock now.
Okay. All right, good, thank you. Daniel, you had something to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I encourage those who haven't been inside of a prison to do so, especially San Quentin. I know in addition to Diane's class, there's another program I took. It's called Quentin Cooks. And you have 2 Bay Area chefs, actually executive chefs that work at five-star restaurants, actually go in and teach us how to cook. I mean, we've made If you were to go inside of a restaurant and have some of the meals we cook, you'd probably pay $75 to $175. But anyhow, my wife and I were invited to go back into San Quentin. There was a clearing process that I had to go through, and the warden actually cleared me and one guest, which was my wife, to go and take a tour of San Quentin. And when she seen those cells, in addition to there was corporate people that were there on that tour. There was, I know there were some people from DOJ, from the governor's office. And they were, so as we're going through the tour and, hearing these guests, oohing and on and asking all these questions, and then to see the look on my wife's face, like, you actually lived in those cells and you guys actually had to do this, and this is where you guys ate, and seeing the prison function from the outside really had an impact on them. And so, and when I was a guest speaker for the graduation of one of the programs, and so many people were asking questions because they never, like Zach had mentioned, people don't get to see what, who we are, who we really are. They just see a number or they see a name on a case, on a court file. But when you actually get to see who the men are, there's always a story behind it. And with that story, they're digging deep to find out who they are and then to make those changes. So I really encourage you to look more into these programs, get involved, and actually take a tour of these prisons. It'll have a huge impact on your perception.
Thanks, Daniel.
Another question. The recidivism rate of 1% contrasts so starkly with the California average. Clearly, the program is effective. How do you select those who can participate? Do you have a dropout rate? What percentage of inmates scheduled for release each year are you able to help? What would it take to help more?
Okay, you may have to repeat some of those questions. There were a lot of them there. But let's see, the 1% recidivism rate, again, we can't take full credit for that because they are a self-selecting group of people. And probably most of the 60 to 65% people who do recidivate are from prisons other than San Quentin. I don't know if they track that kind of information or not, but clearly their rehabilitation programs work. They just do. And we select people based on when they're going to be released. So it's 6 months to a parole board hearing or a year to release for the people with determinate sentences. So it's just based on when you're going to get out, because we want people to have that information the sooner they are to get out. Was there another question in there?
How can they help?
Sorry.
How can who help?
They ask, how can they help?
What would it take to help more people?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we are considering expanding the program to Solano State Prison. We just need to get the infrastructure in place to do it, because the program is me and 2 volunteers. So we would have to raise enough money to be able to pay somebody to do that there. And ideally my board chair says, let's get the prison to employment connection in every prison in California. It's like, yeah, well, let's start with one more and make sure it's done really, really well.
Okay. How are participants selected?
Oh, as I said, they are selected by their release date. So the sooner they're going to get out, the sooner they can get in.
Okay. And let's see, how do you engage employers in the program?
And in other words, how do we get them to come into the program?
Yeah.
Well, all of the employers who come in are second chance employers. There isn't one place to go find them. There's not like a huge list of second chance employers. A lot of the big corporations say they are, but may not actually be. So it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of making connections. In the beginning, when we first started it, it was cold calling. But there's enough of a connection here and knowing people that I can start to recruit more employers. We're always looking for more.
Great. I'm having a little trouble here. I'll ask you another question. Let's see. What advice would you give to people who are at risk of committing a serious crime?
John, want to answer that one?
What's the question again?
Well, they actually had a question for John also, asking what is John doing in his work these days?
Yay, there you go.
I'm a CEO of my own nonprofit called We All We Got, where we will be housing the formerly incarcerated and making sure that they receive that warm and welcoming and homely welcoming in our homes, because there's a lot of trauma associated with post-incarceration that a lot of people don't talk about, a lot of us formerly incarcerated don't talk about, and we need a safe place to do that. And I get it. I know what they go through because I go through it on a daily, and I want to provide that for them. So I created a organization to help the formerly incarcerated.
Thank you, John. Daniel, you also want to talk about what you're doing for work?
Yes, I work for Nugget Markets, and Nugget was on Fortune's 100 top places to work in the country. I've been there ever since I got out. I got hired due to my interview skills that I learned from prison to employment. I landed the job 10 days after I came home, and I'm still there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Meredith, any other questions?
We should ask this last question. I think we're almost done. We've got 2 more minutes. What advice would you give people who are at risk of committing a serious crime? And there are other questions, but we'll see.
Zach, you want to take that real briefly, and then we'll ask John and Daniel?
Yeah, just understand that there's always resources, even if you don't feel that there are. It's just a matter of looking and understanding there's always going to be someone that you know to provide some type of support. Just have the courage to reach out.
Thank you. Daniel?
Talk to somebody. Talk to somebody, or if you're, I know for myself, remembering the last time that I used drugs and remembering what that day felt like and not wanting to go back there has helped me to stay clean and to stay focused on doing the right thing, and the next right thing for the next right reason. And for those who are tempted to do the wrong thing, just think about how you feel now and then multiply that by 10, because you're going to be incarcerated, separated from your family, separated from your loved ones, and having someone else tell you what to do and when to do it, when you could eat, when you can't eat.
Thank you. And then we'll finish up with John.
I would just say, just think, I know I can put together maybe 20 men and their crimes all together maybe lasted 15 minutes. But the years they got in maybe 4,000, right? literally. So if you don't want to have your life and your freedoms and your liberties taken, do yourself a favor and take the time to think before you act. Because it only takes 1 second to get in something in a lifetime to get out of it.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, Daniel, Zach, and John, for joining us in this very moving webinar today. It's extremely educational, and I, for one, and I know everyone else has really gotten a lot out of it.
My honor. Thank you. Thanks for letting us talk about it.
The Outdoor Art Club's next public event will be held 2 weeks from today on April 15 at 1 o'clock. In that webinar, Connor Doherty, New York Times reporter and author of the book Golden Gates, will share stories from some of the citizens of San Francisco who have struggled to find housing in the San Francisco real estate market. And he will offer some possible solutions to the city's housing crisis. You can register for this and all future webinars at the Outdoor Art Club website under public events. Sign up there to be on our email list. Thank you again to everyone for joining us today. We hope that we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.